who hurt you, the very ones who broke your heart, betrayed your trust, and walked away as if you were nothing, they come back. And when that moment comes, you got a choice to make. See, too many of us are so hungry for validation, so desperate for acceptance, that we forget what God already told us about who we are. We forget what he whispered to us in the darkness when they left us bleeding and alone. Your worth isn't defined by those who left you. It was never meant to be, yet it's so easy, almost natural, to start believing that the people who walk away somehow measure what we're worth. When someone you love leaves, betrays, or rejects you, it shakes something deep inside. It whispers lies that maybe you're not enough, maybe you're too much, maybe you're unlovable or unworthy of staying for. And if you sit in that place long enough, you start to wear those lies like clothes, letting them shape your identity and your view of yourself. But hear this clearly: the hands that formed you in your mother's womb never let go of you when others did. The one who spoke purpose into your being didn't withdraw it because someone else failed to see it. When people leave, it hurts deeply because God designed us to desire connection and love. But the truth is, the people who turned their backs were never meant to define the front and center of your life. Their exit doesn't erase your value. It only reveals what they failed to recognize. And their inability to love you the way you deserved isn't evidence of your deficiency. It's a reflection of their limitation. You see, your worth is established by the one who called you fearfully and wonderfully made. Before they ever entered your life, God had already written your story. Before they spoke rejection over you, he had already spoken love, acceptance, and purpose over you. They can't unspeak what he spoke. They can't cancel what he ordained. The problem is our hearts get so tangled in the approval and affection of others that we forget who we really belong to. We forget that we were created in the image of a God whose love is steadfast and whose commitment never wavers. The moment someone rejects us, we start measuring our worth by the void they leave behind rather than the fullness God put within us. But people don't get to rewrite what God wrote. They don't get to shrink what God has expanded. And they don't get to define what God has already defined. Think about it. The people who left you saw only a part of you. They saw your flaws, your weaknesses, maybe even your worst moments. But God sees all of you, your potential, your calling, the gifts he's hidden inside your spirit that haven't even come to the surface yet. They saw brokenness. God sees the vessel he's reshaping. They saw mistakes. God sees the masterpiece he's forming through grace and mercy. Your worth isn't seasonal. It doesn't rise and fall with who stays and who goes. It's anchored in something unshakable, the character and love of an unchanging God. And yes, the rejection still stings. The betrayal still cuts deep. That's real. God never tells us to pretend it didn't happen or to deny the pain. But he does call us to remember that the pain doesn't get the final word. The final word belongs to him. And his word says you're chosen. His word says you're loved with an everlasting love. His word says you're redeemed, precious, and called for a purpose greater than human approval. If you live for the acceptance of people, you'll die by their rejection. But when you live knowing that your worth was established on the cross, sealed by grace and sustained by God's unfailing love, rejection loses its power. Can't label you anymore. It can't paralyze you because you know the truth. Your worth predates their opinion and outlives their presence. So when those who broke you come back, when they try to return with apologies or explanations, don't forget what God taught you in the valley. Don't forget that even when they turned away, he turned toward you. He never looked away in disappointment. He never saw you as less. In fact, sometimes he let them leave so you could finally see what he sees in you. So you could finally stand without leaning on their approval. So you could finally discover a love that doesn't abandon, a purpose that doesn't shift, and an identity that isn't fragile. Remember this, their leaving didn't diminish your value, it exposed it. It proved that your worth is too heavy for shallow hearts to carry. It revealed that God himself had to step in and show you that no one's presence or absence changes what he has spoken over your life. They might have left, but you remained held. They might have walked away, but God never moved an inch from your side. And that truth, more than anything else, is what makes you unbreakable even after you've been broken. Your worth isn't up for debate. It was settled in eternity, and nothing anyone does can touch it. God uses the breaking for your transformation. It's a truth that doesn't always feel comforting in the moment, especially when the breaking feels like devastation. When the people you trusted most betray you. When your heart shatters into pieces so small you can barely see how it will ever be whole again, it rarely feels like something holy is happening. All you can see are the ruins, the ashes of what you thought would last forever. But what we often miss is that the breaking isn't always a sign of God's absence. Sometimes it's the evidence of his deepest work. See, there are places inside us that comfort and success alone can't reach. Places where pride, fear, false identity, and old wounds hide out of sight. And it often takes the shock of breaking, the pain of being left or betrayed, to bring those hidden places into the light. God doesn't delight in our pain, but he loves us too much to leave us bound by things that would eventually destroy us. Though he allows what we thought we couldn't live without to fall apart, not because he wants to see us suffer, but because he wants to build something stronger, truer, and freer in its place. Sometimes what looks like destruction is actually construction in disguise. You thought that relationship was the foundation of your future, but God saw that it was built on fear, on compromise, or on an idol you didn't even recognize. And so in his mercy, he allowed it to break to protect you from building your life on something that could never hold the weight of your calling. What felt like the end was really the beginning of something deeper. Because in the silence that follows heartbreak, you finally hear his voice more clearly. In the loneliness, you finally discover that his presence truly is enough. And in the ashes, you realize that what he wants to build in you is far greater than what you lost. Pain has a way of stripping away the illusions we cling to. It shows us who we really are and what we really believe. It reveals where we've trusted people more than God, where we've made idols out of love, success, or approval. And though it hurts, it's in that revelation that transformation begins. Because God can only heal what we're willing to bring to him. The breaking forces us to bring it all. The tears, the disappointment, the secret insecurities, the anger, and the questions we're too ashamed to say out loud. And when we lay those shattered pieces before him, he doesn't condemn us. The same hands that allowed the breaking begin the mending, but not by simply gluing the pieces back together as they were. Instead, he crafts something new, something stronger. The cracks become places where his light shines through. The pain becomes a testimony of his power to heal. The loss becomes the soil where deeper faith takes root. And slowly you realize that the breaking wasn't the end of your story, it was the turning point. If you think back, you might see it already. You might see how the heartbreak drew you closer to God, how the betrayal opened your eyes to your worth, how the loneliness taught you to stand on your own 2 feet spiritually. What the enemy meant to use to break you beyond repair, God used to build you into someone who can't be easily shaken. Because brokenness in God's hands is never wasted. It becomes the birthplace of wisdom, compassion, and a faith that's been tested by fire and found real. The breaking also teaches you to let go of what you can't control. It humbles you, reminding you that your strength isn't enough and your plans aren't final. It teaches you to lean on grace daily, to see your need for Him not as weakness, but as the very thing that makes you strong. And over time, what you once saw as the worst thing that happened to you becomes the very thing God used to bring out the best in you. That's why, even though it hurts, we can trust Him in the breaking. Because He sees what we can't see. He knows who we're becoming, even when all we can see is who we were. And the transformation He brings isn't temporary. It's eternal. It changes how we see ourselves, how we see Him, and how we see the people who hurt us. The breaking becomes the place where pride dies, love deepens, faith matures, and purpose becomes clear. So yes, God uses the breaking, and in His hands, the broken pieces aren't worthless, they're precious. They're the raw material for something beautiful, holy, and unshakable. And though you may never wish for the breaking, you'll thank Him for the transformation it brought. Because what you gain on the other side is always greater than what you lost. Give, but keep your boundaries. It sounds simple when you say it, but living it out takes strength, wisdom, and deep trust in God. Forgiveness is not a feeling, and it's certainly not forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. Forgiveness is a decision you make, sometimes over and over again, to release the grip of bitterness and anger from your heart. It's saying, what you did hurt me, it disappointed me, and it left a scar. But I refuse to let your actions keep me chained to pain. Forgiveness is freedom, not for them first, but for you. It breaks the cycle that keeps your heart rehearsing the hurt, replaying the offense, and poisoning your peace. But keeping boundaries is just as holy as forgiving. Because forgiveness without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. God doesn't call you to become a doormat in the name of grace. He doesn't ask you to keep putting yourself in the path of repeated betrayal or disrespect just to prove you've forgiven. Forgiveness releases the offense. Boundaries protect your heart from further harm. One is about letting go of the past, the other is about guarding your future. Some people will come back into your life after breaking you, full of apologies and promises. And it may be genuine. But it may also be temporary remorse born out of loneliness or guilt rather than real transformation. That's why you need discernment. Because forgiveness doesn't mean immediate reconciliation. Reconciliation requires trust. And trust requires change, accountability, and time. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you have to let them back into the same place they once held. You can love someone from a distance. You can pray for them and wish them well while still keeping the door to your heart locked until you see consistent fruit in their life. This isn't cold-hearted, it's wisdom. Even Jesus taught about being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Loving your neighbor doesn't mean ignoring patterns of abuse, manipulation, or betrayal. God calls you to protect the temple of your heart because your peace, your purpose, and your calling matter. When you've walked through deep pain, it's easy to confuse forgiveness with erasing all consequences. But real forgiveness doesn't erase the reality that trust must be rebuilt. Keeping boundaries doesn't mean you're still bitter. It means you've learned from the pain. It means you're honoring the lesson God taught you in the breaking. It means you value what He healed so deeply that you won't casually hand it back to the one who broke it. Forgiveness says, I refuse to let what happened yesterday control my joy today. Boundaries say, I've changed because of what happened yesterday, control my joy today. Boundaries say, I've changed because of what happened, and I won't let it happen the same way again. And yes, people may not understand. They may accuse you of being unforgiving or hard-hearted, but they didn't see the nights you cried, the prayers you prayed, or the process you walked through to heal. They didn't feel what it cost you to forgive in the first place. And you don't owe an explanation for the boundaries God puts in your spirit. Peace often requires disappointing other people's expectations, and that's okay. Some will say if you truly forgave, you'd let them back in. But forgiveness is proven in the release of anger, not in the removal of wisdom. You can forgive your betrayer and still choose not to let them sit at the same table they once flipped over. You can bless them and still keep the door to your most tender places closed. You can pray for them and still protect yourself. That's not bitterness. That's growth. When God heals you, part of that healing is giving you the courage to keep healthy boundaries. It's recognizing that some people are not safe for your calling, your peace, or your soul. It doesn't mean they're beyond God's grace, but it does mean you no longer volunteer to be the lesson they keep learning through your pain. It means you trust God enough to let Him handle them while you keep walking in freedom. In time, you may see real change in them, and maybe slowly trust can be rebuilt. But even then, it's okay for trust to grow at the pace of proven fruit, not pressure. Trust is earned, not demanded. And love can remain real even if the relationship never returns to what it was. So yes, forgive them. Release the bitterness, the need for revenge, the endless replaying of what they did, but keep your boundaries strong because you're not the same person who is broken. You're wiser, freer, and closer to God. And your heart is worth protecting, not out of fear, but out of love for yourself, for your purpose, and for what God is still writing in your life. Don't trade peace for past pain. There comes a moment, often right after you've started to heal, when the past shows up at your door. It might come wearing apologies, new promises, or sweet words that sound like music to the parts of your heart that still remember what used to be. And in that moment, there's a pull, an almost magnetic force that tempts you to step backward, to reopen doors God helped you close, to return to what once was, simply because it feels familiar, even if it also once felt like destruction. But you must remember, the peace God gave you came at a cost. It took nights of prayer, honest tears, surrender, and a fierce fight to choose hope over bitterness, faith over fear, and healing over hiding. That peace wasn't free, and the enemy knows if he can't destroy you outright, maybe he can convince you to give your peace away, piece by piece, until you're left with nothing but the same old pain wearing a new disguise. Past pain has a strange way of dressing itself up as unfinished business. It whispers, maybe this time will be different. Maybe you were wrong to walk away. Maybe the apology changes everything. And while forgiveness is always holy, returning to the very thing that broke you without clear evidence of transformation isn't faith. It's spiritual amnesia. It's forgetting what God whispered to you in the midnight hour, what He showed you when you had nothing left but Him. That moment wasn't for nothing. It taught you to lean on Him, to find your identity in Him alone, and to discover the priceless peace that only comes from surrender. Matthew chapter 7. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of God's assurance that your life is in His hands, even when circumstances feel uncertain. You fought to build that peace. You learned to speak truth over yourself instead of the lies of rejection. You learned to pray instead of panic, to worship instead of worry. That inner stillness is one of God's greatest gifts, a refuge that guards your mind and spirit. And once you've tasted it, you realize no amount of false comfort from the past is worth trading it away. When the ones who broke you come back, they often come at the exact moment you're starting to feel strong again. The timing isn't accidental, because the real test isn't just in the breaking. It's in what you'll choose once